Diyos makinaaga sa Indogobos. Good morning to all. I am Francis Moraleda from the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, Museo ni Robredo, and I will be your moderator in today's webinar. Today, we commemorate the 9th death anniversary of the former Secretary of the Interior and Local Government and the former Naga City Mayor Chessy Robredo. It was in 1988 when Chessy Robredo was first elected as Naga City Mayor. As local chief executive, he was faced with an array of problems, including government corruption and public skepticism about the city's administration. He devised a plan to revitalize the city by opening up the administration and involving the citizens in decision-making and urban projects. His reforms have since been adopted as a blueprint for many other cities in the Philippines. In commemoration of the life of Mayor Chessy, we recognize his efforts to make local governments better by offering this free webinar entitled Maogmang Lugar, Naga City as the Center of Good Governance. The NHCP Museo ni Robredo partnered with Saysay Bikol, a local nonprofit organization which studies, explores, and retells Bikol's past through research and publication, instructions, cultural dissemination, and multimedia content. It is hoped that these events' 3 presentations will inspire workers in government and citizens to propose reforms in their respective towns, cities, and provinces. We are currently live at the Facebook pages of the following museums. We have the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, we have the Museo ni Robredo, the Museo ni Jose Rizal Dapitan, the Museo ng Kasaysayang Bicolano, the Museo ni Juan Antonio Luna, the Museo ng Kasaysayang Pang-Ekonomiya ng Pilipinas, and the Saysay Bicol Facebook page. If you have questions for our speakers, kindly send it to us by using the comment section in our Facebook Live. After the program, a link for the evaluation form will be posted at the comment section of our Facebook Live. Kindly accomplish it if you want to receive an e-certificate. So without further ado, I now give the floor to Mr. Victor Dennis Nierva for his opening message and to be followed by Ms. Valen Cortez for the introduction of the speakers. Sir Vic?
Mula sa lungsod ng Naga, pagbati sa inyong lahat ng Diyos marhay na aga. Magandang umaga, good morning. I fervently hope that everyone is safe and well in the confines of their own homes. Naga, the city which Chessy M. Robredo led for almost 2 decades, rests today to commemorate his early passing in 2012 that left us all utterly surprised and heartbroken. We lost a leader, a really good one. And this morning, the NHCP Museo ni Robredo, in cooperation with Saysay Bicol, brings you 3 lectures about very essential and timely topics. When we were ruminating on what to talk about on this special occasion, the first thing that came to mind was that it shouldn't be about Mayor Jess. It should rather be about the city of Naga. Mayor Jess would have preferred to talk about the city than himself. Thus, we went back to 3 practices and values related to governance in Naga when he was the city mayor. Sa panahong ito na kailangan natin ng katiyakan mula sa ating mga pinuno sa pambansa o lokal mang larangan, higit nating kailangang magbalik tanaw sa mga kinilala nating mga huwarang, mga halimbawa at mga ginintuang kasaysayan upang maituwid ang mga nangyayaring baluktot sa lipunan. Hinding-hindi naman tayo kapos sa mga bagay na ito. Kaya sa umagang ito, balikan natin ang 3 pagpapahalaga na nagpakilala sa lungsod ng Naga sa larangan ng pamamahala ni Chessy Robredo. Una, ang mahalagang salik ng kapayapaan. Ikalawa, ang mahalagang pakikilahok ng mga mamamayan. At ikatlo, ang kahusayan at katapatan sa pagpapatupad ng mga reforma. Ang mga bagay na ito ay mahahalagang salik na nagbigay daan sa lungsod ng Naga upang maging huwaran at tampok na lipunan. Ang iba dito ay nagbunga ng mga pambansang pulisiya na pinakikinabangan na ngayon ng bawat isa sa mamamayang Pilipino. Let us go back to these three Robredo period values and fervently hope that they are lived out today, not just in Naga but in every local government unit in the country. Let us Nagueños share with every one of you that yes, we have seen and experienced these values become real and felt in Naga, and they bore not just awards for us, but much fruits. Fruits for the Nagueño way of life. Fruits that we continue to reap today. Fruits that we hope to still reap tomorrow. We go back to these values to constantly remind ourselves that good governance is possible. Peace is possible. People's participation is possible. Transparency reforms are possible in every local government unit and in the whole country. Museo ni Jesse Robredo, the museum dedicated to the man himself, is not simply a museum of our memories of a person, but rather of values, of best practices, of good examples. Perhaps this is the best reason why we hold these lectures this morning under the auspices of the Museo itself. And we in Saysay Bikol, an organization dedicated to the study of Bikol history, we take honor in joining the NHCP Museo ni Jesse Robredo in this retelling of a quite recent yet very important segment of the rich story of the Bicol region, so that this story, this tale, may also be yours. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Diyos mabalos sa inyong gubos.
In behalf of Saysay Bikol, it is truly an honor and privilege to be given the chance and task to introduce our distinguished resource speakers for today's webinar. So I will be introducing to you all at once the three resource speakers for today's webinar. For our first resource speaker in the lecture entitled Naga City as the Zone of Peace, Judge Soliman M. Santos Jr. is a judge of the Regional Trial Court of Naga City, Branch 61. He was awarded by Mayor Jesse M. Robredo in 2007 with a mayoral recognition for peace advocacy, for his dauntless and full-hearted advocacy for peace, people empowerment, advancement of human rights through his an extensive work experience that spanned 2 decades with non-government and people's organizations in various fields of social concerns. In 2006 also, she was awarded by Mayor Jesse M. Robredo with a mayoral recognition for her exemplary leadership, dedication, and pro-people organizing skills and techniques that have significantly contributed to the empowerment of Naga City's urban poor. For our third resource speaker, the last resource speaker for today's webinar, entitled Transparency Reforms in Naga, we have Mr. David Bercasio, where he is a former program director of the Naga City People's Council on NCPC. He is a well-experienced humanitarian worker specializing in emergency preparedness and response with the United Nations International Organization for Migration, for which he has worked in various countries such as Jordan, Iraq, Syria, Turkey, South Sudan, Nigeria, aside from the Philippines. He has also worked with the civil society and the academia. Please join me in warmly welcoming our resource speakers, Judge Soliman Santos Jr., Ms. Salve Alemania, and Mr. David Bercasio, and enlightening us of the legacies left by late Jesse M. Robredo. Good morning, everyone.
Diyos maray na aga sa Indugabus, apisar na pig-pre-record ini kan sarong banggi. On the occasion of the 9th death anniversary of our longtime beloved Mayor Jesse M. Robredo, allow me to first pay tribute for his role in the establishment of his and our beloved city of Naga as a zone of peace. During the first few months of his first term as mayor from 1988 to 1992, I was a leader of the non-governmental coalition of peace advocates based in the city called the Hearts of Peace, shepherded by the late Nagenya Mami Jean Lurin. We initiated a largely symbolic People's Declaration of Naga City as a zone of peace, freedom, and neutrality for the duration of the Peña Francia Fiesta in September 1988. This peace zone was basically an assertion of the people's right to peace, particularly from the armed hostilities between the AFP and the NPA. Jess gave his moral and, quite importantly, political support for this community initiative, which support was indispensable for it to have a fighting chance against the odds of that time. The Naga Peace Zone at that time tended to generate resistance from the security sector, especially the military, which was already in total war mode as declared by then President Cory Aquino after the collapse of the GRP-NDF peace talks in 1987. And even from the local Catholic Church hierarchy, both sectors were gripped by the scare that Reds were taking advantage of, if not behind, the Peace Zone initiative as meant to provide some kind of sanctuary to the NPA. Ironically, the CPP, NPA, NDF would later issue its national level policy against peace zones, which they viewed as counterinsurgency to divide their mass base. So one could imagine that the support Jess gave to the initiative took a certain amount of courage, boldness, or daring. He was then a very young 30-year-old first-time mayor whose Lakas ng Bansa group had a minority of only 2 kagawads against a big majority of 8 kagawads from the Cory Coalition group in the Sangguniang Panlungsod of a city that was a bastion of Catholic conservatism. Jess thus early on reflected a brand of leadership that was open to new ideas and initiatives, to experiment, and even to take risks, whether of a political or security nature, but with a remarkable down-to-earth people skills to win over support for his programs. The risks for Jess with his support for the Naga Peace Zone were underscored by the fact that it was the country's, if not the world's, first ever peace zone. Still an experimental concept. It may not have fully developed or been substantially sustained here, but it was an early example of Naga concepts that spread to and were replicated in many other places. This was most notably seen in the case of peace zones in central Mindanao, with a quite different context of armed conflict between the AFP and MILF, and more than a decade after the Naga Peace Zone became dormant. This dormancy is somewhat unfortunate, if not disappointing, because by also the first few months of the second term of Mayor Robredo, he had approved on November 3, 1992, Sangguniang Panlunsod Resolution number 92-169 to declare the city of Naga as a peace zone, and furthermore, to implore the regional commands of the AFP, NDF, and the RAM-SFP-YOU to meet with the city government of Naga for the following purposes. A. To discuss and guarantee measures to respect the will of the people to make the city of Naga a peace zone. B. To discuss and guarantee the settlement of regional and or local problems which have no national implications and which do not need the intervention of the national government and the national leadership of the NDF and the RAM SFPYOU. And C. To agree on and recommend an agenda for the Bikol region for OU. And C. To agree on and recommend an agenda for the Bicol region for inclusion and consideration of the peace talks at the national level should one be finally held. Almost 3 decades ago have passed, but not much has happened in terms of the further development of the Naga Peace Zone, even along the lines of SP Resolution 92-169. There has been no implored meeting of the city government of Naga with at least the regional commands of the AFP and the NPA, which are still in armed conflict with each other, if only to at least address humanitarian concerns arising from continuing armed hostilities. What has happened was only the declaration of Naga City as a peace zone, albeit remaining largely symbolic in the absence of sufficient follow-through of secured guarantee measures involving the main armed protagonists, which are the AFP, and for that matter the PNP, and the NPA, to respect the will of the people of Naga, to at least keep it off limits to armed conflict. What has happened since then? Well, at least 5 notable insurgency-related killing incidents have occurred in Naga City. 3 killings of police officers, one of them a retired intelligence officer by the NPA from 2003 to 2005. The CPP regional party head with a civilian companion friend in 2018 and a red-tagged former Bayan activist leader in 2019 were killed, admittedly, by security forces in the earlier case. These insurgency-related killings in Naga City may be relatively small in number, but such armed hostilities are contrary to the spirit of the Naga Peace Zone, as well as the city's self-image of Maogmang Lugar, the happy place that Mayor Robredo cultivated for the city. There should be zero casualties here related to the man-made calamity of armed conflict. Just as we say, there should be zero casualties for natural calamities. And for that matter, the legitimate war on drugs, which has unfortunately become another man-made calamity with its inordinate number of killings of drug suspects, including an already significant number of such killings in Naga City, the latest being that of a former court worker only last February in his own home. Sadly, the concerned leaders of and from Naga City at various levels of government and in various concerned sectors have hardly said anything to push back on all these killings, whether insurgency related or drug war related, that do violence to Maogmang Lugar, with a few exceptions. Well known, of course, is Vice President Leni Robredo's general aversion and opposition to the bloody war on drugs. But more than that, she has presented a coherent, comprehensive alternative program to address the drug problem of the country during her unceremoniously aborted, short-lived, but already promising stint as co-chair of the Interagency Committee on Anti-Illegal Drugs. As for the insurgency-related killings in Naga City, there have been, if I remember right, only the two separate reactive privilege speeches by two city kagawads, each condemning a particular incident to be in violation of the Naga Peace Zone under SP Resolution 92-169. First was that of Kagawad Gabriel Bordado Hidalgo Bordado Jr., regarding the September 2003 NPA unit attack on the Carolina Police Substation, resulting in the killing of SPO2 Placido Morales and one unidentified NPA fighter. Second was that of Kagawad Lito del Rosario regarding the March 2018 combined Philippine Army and PNP raid of a Kararayan Camellia Homes unit follow through in terms of dialogue by the city government with the AFP, PNP, and the NPA to discuss and ideally agree on specific guarantee measures and mechanisms that would guarantee the Naga Peace Zone. The effective revival or renewal of the Naga Peace Zone, one of the many good legacies of our beloved city, to our beloved city by the exemplary Mayor Robredo for the greater glory of Naga, can and should be part of the city's agenda by 2022 and beyond. Of course, it almost goes without saying that this would depend much, though not only, on the quality of leadership, both of our city and of our country, come the crucial political juncture in mid-2022. It can be our city's modest but worthy contribution to our country's needed overall peace efforts, especially on the local communist armed conflict front. What could be the key aspects of a revived or renewed Naga Peace Zone? Allow me to propose and outline three aspects of this. First, off limits to armed hostilities. This is the minimum or most basic feature of a peace zone, a safe space or place where citizens can be spared from war. SP Resolution 92-169 does not itself define peace zone, but reference can be made to a congressional bill for a peace zone policy act, hopefully by Rep. Robredo, Bordado, which defines a peace zone as a people-initiated, community-based arrangement in a local geographic area which residents themselves declare to be off limits to armed conflict, primarily to protect the civilians, livelihood and property there, and to contribute to the more comprehensive peace process. This can be expanded as a further development of the Naga peace zone to also off-limits cover two particular types of killings as discussed a while earlier. First, killings of open and legal not them activists who are non-combatants and therefore not legitimate targets for lethal military, police, counterinsurgency operations. And second, drug war killings of suspects who really do not nanlaban or put up any armed resistance. These willful killings, which amount to murder, are actually unlawful or illegal, whether committed in Naga City or outside it. The point of making such killings off limits to the city is not to suggest that they be committed elsewhere, but rather it is to deliver a strong Naga message of prevention against such killings where it has jurisdiction. This is important for Nagas being true to itself as an Maogmang Lugar, even if only symbolically. Needless to say, symbols are important to one's identity and values, whether as a person, as a city, or as a nation. The Naga Peace Zone, as integral to an Maogmang Lugar, also ties in with its more recent 30 September 2019 launching as the sixth justice zone in the country under the auspices of the National Tripartite Justice Sector Coordinating Council involving the Supreme Court, DOJ, and DILG. Certainly, there should be no cardboard justice at street level for drug suspects in a justice zone where there are functioning courts of justice. Naga City is thus now unique for being both a justice zone and a peace zone, thereby highlighting two of the several supreme ideals of our people stated in the preamble of the Philippine Constitution. Acts of injustice or abuse are among the most commonly expressed root causes of internal armed conflict and social unrest. Indeed, there can be no peace without justice, especially social justice. Naga City is thus challenged by a unique opportunity to make its own contribution to the realization of both aspirations. Second, a venue for local peace engagements and dialogues. The Naga Peace Zone SP Resolution 92-169 implores the regional commands of the AFP and NDF to meet with the city government not only to discuss and guarantee measures to respect the will of the people to make the city of Naga a peace zone, but also to discuss and guarantee the settlement of regional and or local problems which have no national implications and which do not need the intervention of the national government, and the national leadership of the NDF, and to agree on and recommend an agenda for the Bicol region for inclusion in and consideration of the peace talks in the national level should one be held. There is actually so much to bring to a good discussion of local, regional, and national problems. Ironically, these discussion meetings may be easier for the city government to arrange with the regional commands of the AFP and NDF during the current pandemic rather than before it, through the use now of the new normal Zoom meeting mode like we have now. Of course, with whatever necessary security safeguards. In any case, the locally autonomous city of Naga should be allowed to blaze its own path of local peace engagement with due regard to its own terms of reference, history, and track record of local governance innovation. It is thus noteworthy that the city's Public Safety Office Chief, Rene Gumba, who represented Mayor Nelson Legacion at the Joint Peace and Security Council meeting on 11 July 2019 in declaring the activation of the City Task Force for Ending the Local Communist Armed Conflict, said that Naga is known as a democratic city, a place where one is free to discuss, debate, or fight for one's principles, but not known as a place where people shed blood, and they hope to keep it that way. In the spirit of wild or even crazy ideas that the peace zone once was, perhaps the city government of Naga, in a tie-up again with Vice President Robredo, and on the premise of sufficient vaccine supplies, can do still another NagaVax Express type of operation to provide single-dose Janssen vaccination shots to the NPA Camarines Sur commanders and fighters who want to have those shots rather than the usual gunshots. Again, with the necessary security safeguards for all concerned, such as if conducted with the assistance of the International Committee of the Red Cross. This would serve our one big common fight against COVID-19 on the principle that no one is safe until everyone is safe. This would also be an occasion for pilot confidence building for the larger peace process, such as through a time and area-bound local ceasefire by both sides, or at least a humanitarian corridor or buffer with similarly worked out terms. The indispensable and good faith cooperation of the AFP-PNP in this would actually make for an excellent conciliatory gesture that is bound to have peacemaking dividends. Third, serving as a positive example, giving moral support. Finally, by reviving or renewing the Naga Peace Zone, our beloved city can additionally or incidentally serve as a positive example or otherwise give moral support, which would possibly spur or encourage the similar revival or renewal of other forms of peace zones from the Cordilleras in northern Luzon down the country to southern Mindanao. Local communities like those in Sagada Mountain Province and elsewhere should be allowed and respected in their autonomous decisions to declare or maintain their localities as peace zones, which are at the minimum off limits to armed conflict and not necessarily off limits to soldiers and rebels, armed or unarmed. These peace zones would best not be co-opted for counterinsurgency, which would only defeat the purpose and even integrity of peace zones as autonomous local community initiatives to protect themselves from continuing armed hostilities of which they want no part in. On the other hand, the rebel side should do its part to honor, recognize, and respect peace zones, autonomously declared by local communities and not automatically brand these peace initiatives as counterinsurgency measures to fragment the organizational and military unity of the revolutionary movement. Aside from keeping peace zones off limits to armed conflict, let them also be safe spaces for peaceful competition between the GRP and the NDF in the delivery of much needed basic services there. In the best interests of the local communities, certainly a win-win solution for them. And more so, in case of continued failure to revive or renew the national level peace negotiations with a proper accompanying ceasefire. In ending, at this critical period for our country, may we find the same kind of courage, boldness, daring, openness to new ideas, to experiment, and to take risks shown by Mayor Jess Robredo. This time, for the greater contributions bound to be made by Naga as a peace zone. Jess Mabalos.
Thank you so much, Judge Sol. Just a reminder to our participants, we will be opening the discussion or the open forum later on after the discussion of our three speakers for this morning. So we now proceed to the second part of our program. We have the talk or the lecture of Ms. Salve Alemania, People's Participation in Local Government of Naga. You're on mute po.
Okay na po ba? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Paano pinali? Okay, nakikita po ba yung slides? Or ano yung nasa screen ko? Hello? Hello? Ano po yung nakikita sa screen? Kasi I also prepared PowerPoint presentation so habang nag-discuss. So, bakit itong... Okay, sige. Thank you. So magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Good morning everybody. So ito po yung binigay sa aking task ng National Historical Commission to discuss the people's participation of Naga City experience. So babalikan natin ang history ng people's participation in local governance, ito talaga ay nagsimula sa Naga City. So, because of Secretary Jess Robredo. So, Naga is multi-awarded on people's participation in governance. So, marami siyang nakuhang awards, citation, both sa abroad at sa local. Pero ito yung awards na masasabi natin. Ito yung resulta ng active lobbying and participation ng mga NGOs and people's organization sa different venues sa ating government. And on the part of the government, there is openness. Kaya naging responsive yung ating government. So generally, the EDSA revolution in 1986 paved the way for the NGOs and people's organization to directly engage in participating in government affairs. So for the NGO, hindi man ito magandang pagbukas, hesitant pa rin tayo. This was the beginning of the marginalized sectors who were given the opportunity to air out their issues and concerns without prejudices. So saan ito nangyayari? Diba, yung Naga kasi kilala na marami siyang progresibong individual, mga progresibong tao, grupo, na dito din ginagawa yung ating mga, diba, noong mga panahon, mga rallies, mass actions, na usually ay pinangungunahan ng mga iba-ibang political blocks. So, meron yung Pandayan, yung Naga Pabdem, at mga multi-sectoral and cost-oriented groups. So ito yung forum na to na kung saan yung mga communities, these marginalized sectors with the farmers, the urban poor, the women, the peasant, the fisheries come together para ilabas yung kanilang mga issues. And ito yung nagbibigay sa mga tao para ilabas at hindi sila i-judge, kundi pakinggan ng ating government. So for documents on the people's participation, ito talaga ay nagsimula when Mayor Jesse Robredo was elected as mayor. He was elected in 1988, pero parang mas naging bukas siya a year after his term as mayor of Naga City. So nung panahon na yon, one of the most active sector in Naga City, siyempre andyan din yung grupo ng mga kababaihan, ng mga transport sector, yung Naga City Urban Poor or yung Urban Poor sector. Masasabi natin na sila yung pinaka-aktibong sector kasi ito yung dumaan sa proseso ng pag-oorganisa na kailangan mong ipakita sa kanila na you have the power. So, kasi yung pag-oorganisa ng Hope Foundation na issue-based organizing, tinuturuan yung mga tao na i-identify, i-analyze, i-prioritize yung mga issues para ito ay kilusan. So, sa umpisa, kailangan mong iparamdam or mismong mag-experience na sila ay may kakayahan. So, Urban Poor started with small issues. So, meron yung issue on the absence of potable water. So, ano yan sa Mabolo? Naging experience nila. Yung absence ng mga basic services, yung walang maayos na tulay kasi during those years, ang Naga City ay marami pa din ang swampy areas. So this was the sector na masasabi natin, dumaan talaga siya sa isang pagsubok na unfriendly yung government. Kaya na-involve siya sa mga mass actions, yung forum, dialogue with the different sectors na nabuo yung People's Council for the Promotion of Rights and Welfare. So itong PCPRW, ito yung grupo ng multi-sectoral or cost-oriented groups kasama yung mga student councils ng school sa Naga City. And then dyan yung Naga Pabdem, yung bayan, yung farmers, fisher folks, yung transport sector, yung consumer, yung urban poor, at mga pro-urban poor lawyers na nagkita-kita para ipresenta o mag-take action on the local and national issues. So ang kadalasang national issues noon ay oil price increase. Meron ding mga issues sa, di ba, hindi maayos na services ng ating electricity sa local level. So ito yung multi-sectoral groups, ang mga sector mismo ang nagpipresenta ng kanilang issues na ito yung naging oportunidad para umangat ang kanilang kaalaman. So this contributed in raising the awareness of the different sectors on various issues concerning the sector in general doon sa ating bilang Pilipino. So ito yung sinis na opportunity din ng urban poor sector na sumama sa multi-sectoral groups para i-advance yung kanyang mga issues. So isa dito yung pagkakaroon ng security of land tenure and basic social services. So nung pumunta si President Cory Aquino, it was the time na pinagpresenta ng sektor yung kanilang agenda, and eto din yung naging response ng mayor ng Naga City na gumawa siya ng executive order para mag-create ng Urban Poor Affairs Office. So eto yung office that will address or act on the issues na urban poor sector ang apektado. So ito ngayon, dati ano lang siya, part of the office of the mayor, pero ngayon isa na talaga siyang departamento na tumutugon sa issue ng urban poor o kawala ng lupa, bahay at lupa. So ito yung first step na ginawa ng Naga na siya lang talaga ang gumawa. And later on, syempre may marami din mga local government units ang nakaalam at ginaya na rin ito. So it was replicated to other cities. So sa PCPRW, kasi ano yan before the local government code, ito yung grupo na kinikilala ng ating city government para sa mga issues and concerns. So nagiging regular yung discussion on the issues. Merong mga forum, may dialogue, merong focus group discussion, roundtable discussions na kadalasan ay ginagawa after office kasi syempre preoccupied naman tayo sa kanya-kanyang gawain. Pero dito nangyayari yung mga ideya na maaring gamitin para or mga ideya na maaring maging simula ng partnership ng NGO, ng PO at ng local government code. So 1991, this was the passage of the local government code of LGC, Republic Act 7610. So ito yung nagbibigay ng karapatan sa mga NGO, POs na makipaglahok. So dahil merong grupo ng mga NGO at PO at national network sa Naga City, Naga was the first LGU to convene and conduct a forum on the local government code. So dahil kailangan doon sa local government code na accredited yung mga POs and NGOs para lumahok sa ating government, dito nangyari yung pagbubuo ng mga komitiba para tingnan yung ating mga government, mga partner NGOs kasama sa sektor kung sila ba ay maaring magpa-accredit. So some of the members of the PCPRW hindi nakapag-comply kasi may mga documentary requirements na hindi nakapag-comply. So in 1993, dahil nasa process siya ng accreditation, merong 74 accredited organizations na nagbuo ng loose coalition ng mga NGOs, POs, na ang kagustuhan niya ay ma-establish etong critical partnership with the state government. So it's the NGO-PO Ad Hoc Council or Coordinating Council shall serve as a venue or forum for the resolution of issues affecting the basic sector. At ito din yung grupo na iaangat yung people's participation. So yung objective niya, siyempre yung NGO-PO Council na binuo, ito dapat yung magiging regular consultative body ng Sangguniang Panlungsod. Ito yung gusto ng council na makapag-come up ng comprehensive development plan based on the sectoral agenda. So sectors talaga ang bubuo ng kanyang mga plano. Makapag-participate yung buong proseso ng development yung ating mga sektor at ma-share yung resources. Siyempre, alam natin kapag NGO People's Organization, hindi masyadong nabibigyan ng resources, but the government has it. So, ito yung pagkakataon na mabigyan din ng resources yung ating mga People's Organization. And eventually, to become a representatives to the local government, to the local special bodies ng ating government. So ito yung naging simula ng engagement ng people's organization and then government organization sa local government. Masasabi natin na this happened kasi merong dynamic interaction and an open communication lines between and among the members of the Sangguniang Panlungsod. So merong sa executive, of course it's Mayor Robredo, and the legislative council, yung mga city councilors natin na hindi man sila lahat ay kumbinsido sa ganitong arrangement na kasama yung mga tao na NGO-PO, ay mas marami pa rin yung sumusuporta sa ating people's participation in governance. So, with the passage ng ating local government code, nabuo rin yung NGO-PO Coordinating Council kasi nalimit na lang siya sa mga nalimit na lang siya sa mga accredited. So ito na yung mga madalas na nag-uusap-usap at dahil merong ginawang pag-uusap, madalas na pag-uusap yung ating mga local government units, merong mga department heads and yung mga writers ng city government, Mayor Robredo, department heads, and city council. Merong dalawang national laws na na-localize. Ibig sabihin, it was Naga City na mas dinitalye niya ang national laws na to na acceptable and implementable sa ating city government. So yung RA 7160, ito yung Local Government Code of 1991, meron tayong Republic Act 7279 na Urban Development and Housing Act, both na national laws, pero ginawa ito ng local version ng City of Naga through the efforts, of course, of headed by the former City Councilor, Attorney James Hakub. So ito yung nagbibigay ng mas laman at nagsisiguro na hindi na mawawala ang people's participation sa Naga City, whoever takes the place as city mayor or city council members. So, ito yon. Na 1995, yung ordinance na tinatawag natin ngayon, Simple Empowerment Ordinance, or an ordinance initiating a system of partnership in local government between the city government of Naga and the people of Naga City. So ito na local laws. So bakit ito nangyari? So, syempre, ito yung advocacy ng mga NGO and people's organization na i-influence natin yung ating mga legislators to adopt policy. So, sa buong proseso nito, masasabi namin na it was hindi man sila ang nagsulat, pero Attorney James Jacob would agree na yung mga idea na nakapalaman sa ordinansang ito ay mula sa mga grassroots community, mula sa mga organisadong grupo, mula sa basic sectors. So, hindi lang ito brains ng Naga City, city officials or Mayor Robredo. They acknowledge na lahat ito ay nagdaan sa proseso na merong input or recommendations na ginawa ang ating mga organized group. So, ito, di ba sa local government code, pwede tayo mag-initiate ng mga laws. Hindi nga lang directly, pero pwede nating padaanin sa ating mga councilors at pwede tayong mag-campaign ng policy at mga policy at law. So, merong mga ordinansa na pwede tayong maghain through the city council. So, ito yung dalawang national laws na diniscuss ko kanina, yung Local Government Code of 1991 na ang trust niya ay devolution, decentralization, and autonomy. Lahat, itong dalawang ordinance na to ay effective people's participation in the development process. So, mula sa planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation process, kasama yung ating mga base group, yung ating NGO and people's organization. So, dalawa to na ordinansa. Kung ito yung 90 Empowerment Ordinance, nagbuo ng Naga City People's Council. Yung kaantabay sa Kauswagan Ordinance ay nagbuo ng Urban Development and Housing Board. So ito yung kaantabay sa Kauswagan Ordinance which was passed in 1998. Ito yung ordinansa na nagbibigay security sa mga urban poor. Kasi that was, 1998 was the last year of Secretary Robredo as mayor. So, ang pangamba ng mga tao baka pag hindi na si Mayor Robredo ang mayor, hindi na tayo mabigyan ng participation, hindi na tayo kilalanin, hindi na tayo mabigyan pa ng opportunity na makapag-participate o makagahain man lang ng ating mga saloobin. So ito yung ordinansa na nagbigay ng security sa sektor ng urban poor. Kasi ito yung policy making body ng city government. At dito sinasabi ng ordinansa na urban poor is indispensable partner ng city government of Naga. So hindi siya pwedeng mawala sa eksena ng sa eksena ng pamamahala sa usapin ng urban poor. So yung empowerment ordinance, sinasabi dito na duly accredited Naga-based accredited NGO-PO lang ang pwedeng mag-participate. At yung Naga City People's Council ay hindi saklaw ng city government. Ito ay binigyan ng autonomiya na magbuo ng sariling organizational structures and internal rules. At kung meron man mga NGO-PO na hindi accredited, ito yung task ng ating Naga City People's Council na magkaroon ng adequate consultation sa kanila para mapakinggan pa rin yung boses nila. So obtaining the views, the questions of all political parties, hindi sila pwedeng maging member, pero kailangan marinig yung kanilang mga saloobin. Kailangan mapakinggan yung kanilang mga views. So through the ordinance na city na 95-92, the accredited NGO-POs petitioned to the Sangguniang Palusot to be recognized as city's partner, and the Sangguniang Palusot convened all the accredited NGO-POs for the formation of the Naga City People's Council. So yung lahat ng NGO-PO na accredited, nagbigay ng petition sa city government na eto, organisado na kami bilang Naga City People's Council at ready na kami makipag-partner sa inyo. So eto na yung nagbigay, kumbaga, nabuo na, nabigyan na ng pangalan, na-recognize na ng city that the Naga City People's Council will be the partners of the city in all affairs of the government. So, ito yung first in the city, first in the nation, first sa Pilipinas, di ba? Ito yung nagbigay ng mas malawak na participation. Ito yung nagbigay ng partisipasyon sa mga ordinaryong member ng sektor na makapaglahok sa Sangguniang Palusot. Hindi man sila pinagbotohan, pero they can participate in the deliberations. So counted sila sa forum during the sessions, kung merong mga committee hearings, at part sila ng pagdetermine ng forum. So noong umpisa, ito yung hindi matanggap ng mga members of the Sangguniang Palusot members kasi why they should be included daw sa quorum at sa deliberation na hindi naman sila elected ng tao. Samantalang baka sila as elected members of the Sangguniang Palusot ay hindi na makapag-participate. So may ganong hesitancy on the part of the members of the Sangguniang Palusot. Pero ano din to, tuloy-tuloy na rin na natanggap ng government kasi ano nga siya, nasa ordinansa na part na ng Sangguniang Palusot working committees ay galing sa sector or galing sa NGO, PO, and sectors ng ating city. Ito yung binigay na powers and responsibilities sa Naga City People's Council. So, sa participation sa conception, implementation, and evaluation of government activities. So, etong sabi to may observe and vote and participate. Hindi na ito ginagawang may observe, kundi talagang we observe, we vote, and participate sa deliberation, sa conceptualization, sa implementation ng mga programs and activities ng city government. And yung embodied din sa local government code na pwede tayo magpasa ng legislations or proposed ordinances, siyempre ipapadaan sa ating mga members of the Sanggunian, and to exercise the constitutional rights to information on matters of affecting public concern and access to official records and documents. So paano ba talaga siya naisasabuhay yung empowerment ordinance. So, local government code, sinasabi na at least minimum of 25%. So, sa members ng NGOPO Council, Naga City People's Council, part siya ng City Development Council and local special bodies, pleb, Visitors Committee, School Board. Ang kakaiba lang, dun sa Housing Board na binuo ng ordinansa, equal ang numbers. So hindi na siya 50, hindi siya 75-25. Sa Housing Board, 10 members from the city and 10 members also from the urban NGOPO. So meron din mga standing committees na at least 25% o isang representative ang kasama na galing sa Naga City People's Council. So, isa ding magandang nangyari kasi sa ordinansa sinasabi na 300,000 lang yung ibibigay na pondo for Naga City People's Council. Pero with Mayor Robredo, ginawa to more than 1 million para mas ayusin yung mga sektor. So, nakapalaman doon na kailangang mag-organisa, palakasin ang mga basic sector para paghandaan yung pakikipaglahok nito sa local government. Okay. So, sa ngayon, merong 87 members yung Naga City People's Council. So, ito yung kasama din yung mga sektor ng urban poor, youth, children, business, labor, senior citizen, women, and meron 14 sectors na ito yung nagiging highest policy making body of the council. So ano yung outcome ng mahabang proseso nito na ginagawa ng Naga City People's Council as partner of the city? So merong strengthened partnership. So partnership at the city level at meron ding local level yung Barangay People's Council. So dahil magandang organisado ka, lahat ng mga sektor ay mag-organize lang. Sa usapin ng urban poor sector, may mga site upgrading na ginagawa na ang pondo ay hindi na lang galing sa city government, bagkus galing sa ibang institution na dahil parang dahil sa good governance ay nagbibigay ng pondo sa city government. So, ito yung hindi nawawala, yung consultation and between and among the sectors in the city government. So, ang ating sektor ay kasama na sa anumang problema ang kinakaharap nila. So, it's not the city government who would give solution to the problems, kundi kasama yung mga tao. Sa comprehensive planning for the development of Naga City, kasama yung preparation ng budget, yung mga comprehensive plan, land use plan, kasama yung Naga City People's Council. Then, accreditation of membership sa barangay level, so meron tayong Barangay People's Council, merong Barangay Development Council na kailangang mag-participate at simula sa barangay pa lang. So, meron din mga ginagawang regional activities, yung mga city sharing on good governance, security of tenure, na kung saan etong good governance programs and activities ng government ay nare-replicate sa ibang cities. Halimbawa sa Legazpi City, they also have this urban poor program, meron din silang urban poor affairs office sa ibang cities. So mas lumalawak yung good governance ng Naga City sa ibang cities ng Bikol region. So multi-stakeholder planning process are now adopted at the community level. So mula sa pagpaplano kung ano yung pag-identify ng problems, pagpaplano kung anong gagawin at budget, kasama na yung mga basic sector, yung non-government organization. So the opportunity for the people's organization in Naga City to share the experience with other organizations in the Bicol region and other places. So yung Naga, madalas silang may madalas binibisita nung hindi pa naman pandemic. Kasi dito nagiging learning site kung paano ginagawa yung people's participation. So merong cross-mentoring ng program of stakeholders from Naga City na pinagpa-facilitate sa ibang mga city. So, nagagaya or mas na-improve pa nila yung programa para sa basic sector. So, ang lahat nito ay nag-provide sa mga organizations para i-advance yung kanilang agenda. So, ano yung mga naging success? Kasi masasabi natin na successful yung programa ng city, lalo na yung good governance. Una, meron tayong mga supportive officials. Diba? Maraming mga officials na hindi na no sa people's participation. Tanggap na nila na kasama yung mga tao sa government affairs. Meron namang mga commitment na members organization at strong NGO-PO na sususugan itong makipaglahok sa pamamahala sa ating government. At hindi nawawala yung informal dialogue or roundtable discussions para pag-usapan yung mga nangyayari. So, hindi lang formal na dialogue, meron din mga informal discussion, roundtable discussion. Yung capacity building ng NGO at people's organization para alam niya kung paano makipaglahok at alam niya ang kinakaharap ng sektor. So, BPC organizing, ginagawa yung participation. At ito yung perspektiba ng Naga na maganda. Kapag hindi bawal, o pwede. So, halimbawa nito ay yung funding. So, sa ordinance, meron siyang 300,000, pero tinaasan pa ng city government. Hindi naman siya pinagbabawal, kaya pwede siyang gawin. And ano yung mga factors para ma-sustain or parang hindi na tayo dapat bumalik pa sa wala kasi meron na. So, merong mga tripartite mechanism, meron tayong mga organized people's organization at the barangay level. So, merong mga sectoral, merong mga school board, at merong mga boards and special committees na nagbibigay ng people's participation sa halimbawa, sa urban po, merong housing board. Sa children, merong Naga City Council for the Promotion of Children, Naga City Investment Board, Naga City Council for Youth Affairs, City Agriculture Official Council, the Naga City Council for Women. Ito yung mga council, special council, na merong nilalagay na NGO-PO para magbigay ng kanilang issues and concerns. So, ano yung mga tingin nila na kailangan pagtugunan ng ating government. So yung empowerment ordinance na nagbibigay recognition sa nagkilala sa Naga City People's Council. Andyan na to eh. Kailangan lang palakasin yung ating grupo dahil andyan na yung oportunidad para maglahok sa ating pamamahala sa government. So meron din yung presence ng siyempre, yung presence ng mga tao sa government na nagkikilala na ang mga tao ay may kakayahan na makipaglahok. And transparency, lahat naman ay nakabukas. So, yung city government is known for that. Wala siya tinatago na pamamahala. So, lahat ito ay nakabilad. So, yung mga lessons learned, so dahil kailangan na mag-organisa, ito yung nakikita namin na kapag organisado ang isang komunidad, mas nakikita yung power. Getting organized is the crucial factor in empowering the people. Kasi kung ang mga tao ay organized or equipped na ng skills, knowledge, and attitude, kaya nilang ilaban yung kanilang mga gusto, mga aspiration. And this create the atmosphere of empowerment through collective action. Siyempre, alam nila yung problema nila at kikilos sila kapag organisado. The responsibility of the good and effective governance, so hindi lang sa government, pero nandoon din yung obligasyon ng mga tao na lumahok sa ating pamamahala. So, hindi ko good governance ay sa government lang umaasa kung paano niya patatakbuhin, pagkos kailangan makialam at makilahok yung ating mga people's organization. Then, the visibility of people's organization and their support groups either in lobbying or in the negotiation with the City Hall is a great value in establishing a dynamic relationship between the people's organization and the government. So, diba? Ito yung sabing power is number is power. Magpakita tayo ng pwersa. So kung naglalabi tayo sa city government, kailangan ipakita na ito yung taong magbebenepisyo, ito yung mga taong apektado. Kaya gawin niyo tong mga mga sinasuggest na programs or activities or laws para ma-resolve yung issue ng sector. The people's organization in entering engagement must have a more experience in the use of power. Sabi nga, yung power, hindi dapat, equal ka dapat eh. Pero kapag hindi alam ng mga tao kung paano gamitin yung power, it could face the danger of co-optation and manipulation. So, yung parang binigyan lang siya ng konting pagbukas, pero madadala na siya dun sa kagustuhan ng hindi kaaya-ayang programa or pagkilos. The foundation of effective partnership is still the militancy, critical consciousness, and analytical empowered people's organization, journeying with the support groups in continuous engagement with the local and national government agencies. So, ano yung mga challenges na kinaharap ng Naga City People's Council? So, yung transfer of technology and capacity building. So, di ba? Yung representative ng Naga City People's Council in the different local special bodies ay mula sa sektor. So, dahil mula sa sektor, minsan nagbabago-bago yung mga liderato nito. So, kapag naiba naman yung liderato, magbabago ka na naman hindi magbabago. Magti-train ka na naman sa kanya para maging ready siya to be a representative in the special bodies. Being on top, so Naga City, awarded na. Paano ba i-maintain yung pagiging model niya, the best, at paano isi-sustain yung participation with substance and not just compliance, di ba? So parang ang pakikilahok sa pamahalaan ay ginagawa para i-advance yung sector at hindi lang compliance dahil nandyan sa local government code, nandyan sa ordinansa, pupunta lang yun sa session for the quorum, for the attendance. Dapat ay participation talaga, strong na pakikipaglahok sa ating government. Financial sustainability. So mula noon, creation ng Naga City People's Council, hanggang ngayon ay funded ng city government yung Naga City People's Council. So, ito yung usapin, paano ba ito magiging independent na hindi na magre-rely sa government funds on its operations. Although, okay naman yun na binibigyan siya. Pero other than the city government fund, paano siya masusustain from funding from other sources? Maintaining integrity. So, NCPC need not to be supported to the city when it is not favorable to the LGBTQ community. Dapat hiwalay siya, partner siya, pero hindi ka dapat, hindi mo mako-compromise yung NGOPO community. So what's next? Ito yung sabi ng, in a meeting with the chair of the Naga City People's Council, ito yung mga kailangang gawin ng Naga City People's Council sa ngayon para mas mapalawak pa yung pakikipaglahok. One is institutional development. So maging proactive na ang Naga City People's Council. For a time daw kasi hindi na siya nagiging proactive, parang reactive. Ibig kung ano yung pangangailangan, yun na lang gano'n, hindi na siya nauuna. Mas nagre-react na doon sa mga nangyayari. Enhancement of performance of the board of directors and secretariats. Mas iangat pa yung ginagawa ng mga members of the board and the secretariat para mas mapalawak pa yung participation sa ating government. And Empower Council. Yung capacity building ng different sectors ay patuloy na gawin kasi kapag empowered na o merong kamalayan yung ating mga communities ay meron din siyang power na makipag-negotiate. Resource development. So ito yung kagustuhan din ng Naga City People's Council na maging independent na, magkaroon ng sustainable income. And now, they're in the process of reviewing the collaborative agreement between NCPC and LGU. Ano ba yung, dapat maging clear daw yung agreement of partnership ng Naga City People's Council and local government. So, ito yung principles ng Naga City para sa people's participation na sa tingin natin ay kapag inuna ng city government ang mga tao, walang dahilan para hindi maganda ang pamamahala. So, the will of the people shall always reign supreme. So, unahin natin yung mga tao. Mag-organize tayo kasi hindi naman responsibilidad lang ng government ang pamamahala. Ito din ay responsibilidad ng mga tao para lumahok sa maayos na pamamahala ng ating gobyerno. So, yun lamang po at maraming salamat sa ating lahat.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Salve. Again, I'd like to remind our participants, if you have questions, kindly chat it in the comment section of our Facebook page, and we will throw the question later on during the open forum. Now we proceed to the last part, to the third lecture for this morning's event. We have Mr. David Bercasio. The topic is transparency reforms in Naga City. Sir?
Okay, good morning. Let me just check if the slides are working properly.
And okay na po, sir.
Sige. Okay. Second. Okay, good morning. Just maray na aldaw. I'm honored to be joining you all today as we celebrate the life and the contributions and impact of the late Mayor Robredo to the brand of governance, to the brand of good governance of the city of Naga. I am equally honored to share the panel with Judge Sol and Salve, both of whom have significantly contributed to the birth and the beginnings of the People's Council in the city. Special thanks to the National Historical Commission, the Philippines, the Museo ni Robredo, and Saysay Bikol for organizing this very important event. When Vic relayed the invitation for today's forum, I got excited, especially when he informed me that the intention today is not to make the discussions academic, but more experiential. I'm happy with this approach for two reasons. Number one, there are already a good number of published studies on the governance model of the city at the time of Mayor Robredo, and these resources are available to us all online. Second, I feel that at times when we look at the totality or consider the totality of the governance innovations in Naga, it can appear complex, daunting, or seemingly difficult to replicate. So my intention this morning is to discuss two policy reforms adopted by the city at the time of then Mayor Robredo, and talk about some of the activities and values that I feel have guided and deepened these policy reforms. It is my hope that you can take away some initiatives for replication for those who work in local government, both the executive and legislative, or for engagement for the citizens or those belonging to citizen groups. Before we begin, allow me to share the definition used by ICMA on transparency and transparent government. ICMA is the International City or County Management Association based in the West. And they have defined transparency as the principles of allowing those affected by administrative decisions to know about the results of the process and the process that led to decisions. And transparent governance means the government officials act openly with citizens' knowledge of the decisions the officials are making. Let's keep these definitions in mind as we go along with my presentation. I will divide my presentation into 3 pieces. First, on policy. Second, let's look at some of the practices adapted beyond the policy. And third, some of the principles that I feel at the time guided the decisions of the city government. For the first part, I will introduce or reintroduce 2 policy reforms that highlighted transparency in local governance at the time. Both of these were considered as trailblazers at the time of their enactment. Second, I will talk about 3 initiatives implemented by the city government that captures how the principle of transparency is actualized and practiced beyond what these laws provide. And lastly, I will share my insights on how I have seen Mayor Jess lived the principles of transparency on his day-to-day work as mayor and life as a citizen of the city. So first, let's look at the Empowerment Ordinance, Ordinance number 95-092. While Salve has already covered this in length during her presentation, I would like to focus on 4 areas that are relevant in our discussions of a transparent government. Remember that this was passed in 1996. So sections, sorry, I think my slide jumped. Here you go. Okay, sections 11 and 13 just talked about, and Salve already covered this, talked about the appointment of the members of the Naga City People's Council to the standing committees of the Sanggunian and the special bodies that were created at the time or will be created in the future. For me, these are very important provisions that underscored how the city government looked at information openness, transparency, and participation. Imagine a local legislative council where during the deliberations of proposed ordinances, those who might be affected by said proposed legislation will know the proposal, will be able to discuss together with their peers, their sectors, their constituencies, the impact of these proposals to themselves, to their sectors, and to the city as a whole, and thereby also participate in the deliberations. So very important provisions opening the information on how the government makes decision from the time that the proposal is made until the time that the policy is approved. That's the first relevant provision. The second, let's look at section 20 that talks about public hearings, consultations, referenda, and plebiscite. And this is also a very important provision adopted in the city following the engagement of the civil society that Judge Sol and Salve mentioned earlier. For the city, and you might have heard this before, when we talk about the issues of golf course, the dump site, we always look at how the citizens of the city were involved in the discussions and the deliberations. Also, I was not here at the time, but there was a referendum placed on the decision if whether or not the city will accept casinos to operate. And for the city government, issues of this magnitude in terms of the impact on how the citizens live their lives in the city are always important to be presented to the people and not only to be left on the hands of the elected officials. And last on the empowerment ordinance is the information boards and suggestion boxes. Again, this is 1995, right? Pre-Facebook, not pre-internet, but we don't have the same access as we have now. So the empowerment ordinance mandated the city government to put up information boards where information relevant to the public should be posted, and also put suggestion boxes where citizens can give their feedback, comments, suggestions to the government, and place these boxes in strategic locations. Of course, now I'll discuss later, we have new tools around this. But looking at the time that this was passed, the government and the People's Council are already very clear in terms of what information to put, how to put it, and how to get the feedback of the people when they do receive this information. The second policy reform is the I-Governance Ordinance, passed in 2002, 2002-063. I'll go through some of the provisions. Both of these are available online. If you need to, we can share the links with you. It's in the website of the city government. But early on in 2002, again, this is also a globally recognized policy and program of the city government. Very early on, the government took upon itself to expand access to information beyond those members of the organized groups. Again, if you remember the discussions of Salve, the city government has opened the avenue for participation for the members of the organized groups belonging to the marginalized sectors, the people's organization, and the non-government organizations. But with I-governance, it was clear on the mind of the city government at the time that given the advancements in communications and information technology, there is a need to expand the reach in terms of information on the part of the city going towards the citizens. And the first principle that the city government adopted is that transparency in government decision making and administration requires information openness in matters involving the affairs of the government. And number two, the transparency in government administration and people's creative use of information generate broad-based support and stakeholdership. The next component that is relevant are those that were not created, but institutionalized with this ordinance. Quick background, there was already the I-governance program prior to the institutionalization through the I-governance ordinance. So the first was the naga.gov.ph. This is the website that was also largely recognized at the time. It was, again, the first of at least in a large sense, one of the first in the country to contain all the relevant information that a citizen of the city should know in terms of how the government are deciding and what programs and policies are being implemented that would eventually impact their day-to-day lives. So Naga looks at all the information about the city with downloadable maps, charts, and tables. And I was there at the time and appreciated a lot the talent within the city government to put together this collective information that can be made accessible to the people of the city. Early on, we have GIS experts looking at maps, interactive maps for the city. Second is Serve Naga. So it looks at a comprehensive presentation and catalog of all the services being rendered by the government. You can go to the website, check the service that you want to avail. You can download the form that you would use to avail of such service, and also and use that when you go and eventually visit City Hall. So again, imagine this is something that we take for granted now. We can do it easily in almost all of our transactions, both private and public. But at that time, this is really revolutionary. The third is Share Naga, looking at all of the information about the transactions and operations of the city government, publishing the finances, budget, expenditure, bidding, results, ordinances and resolutions, and the directory of city officials. So this is another important step in ensuring that the citizens are informed on how the government is run and managed. And I'll shout out to Councilor Miles Rakid Arroyo because she actually authored another ordinance in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, called the People's Budget Ordinance. In that ordinance, it's not enough anymore for the city to publish the approved annual budget, but together with the Naga City People's Council, they would be asking the department heads of the city government to submit the proposal, the budget, the planned activities, and the proposed budget before they are submitted to the Sangguniang Peninsula. So now the people would have more advanced information and would have the opportunity to comment on the budget before it's actually published. There's also an initiative that we're working on together with some students to look at perhaps expanding a little bit more the information, because now we can access the approved ordinance, but maybe we can look at accessing the proposed ordinances before they get approved. So we'll keep you posted if things progress as planned. And then the last is Star Naga, which this is what we call the feel-good part of the website, acknowledging the awards and the accomplishments of the city. And for Mayor Jess at the time, this is important, not because only of the award, but it helps shape how we as citizens look at our city, the pride and the potentials that our city has. And last, the Naga City Citizen Charter. So this was passed to again too early on, and now it's something that is being required of all government units with the passage of the anti-red tape law. But at the time, this is a document that we provide. The city government prints the charter because not everyone has access to the internet, and this is something that they can refer to if they want to avail of the services. Just a quick description. As you know now, you'll see the services provided, the steps that you need to follow to avail of the service, and the time that it should take for that service to be made available to you. And there's also a detachable feedback to generate comment. Again, it's also based the loop, right? If the government is doing something, he makes sure that he would be able to get the information from the citizens on how the city is doing in terms of providing the service. So those were the two services that were policy reforms adopted during time of Mayor Robredo. For this part, I just want to talk about some of the practice that were implemented outside of the ordinance. I call it the tax, the medicine, and the public market rates. The tax, you might have heard that the city government at some point raised the real property tax in the city, and the business sector endorsed the proposed increase. The story was the city presented to the community the budget, the funds of the city, and the required money in order for it to deliver the services and to implement the development programs intended for the city. And with this transparency, the public, the business sector, and the community supported and endorsed the increase. Same with the medicine. You've heard it before that the mayor at the time released the price of medicine that are being purchased by the city government and asked the public and the business sector if they can match or even offer better price. And the city was always pride itself of having one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest, medicines purchased in the country. And again, it's important when the government puts out this information. It's counterintuitive. If you look at it at a traditional government setup, you'd think that they would always, like looking now at some of the issues that we're looking at the national government. So you'd think that they would hide prices so that they can benefit, but the city government of Naga are putting it out so that they can ensure that they are getting the best value for the taxes of the people. That's always the mantra, as you'd say. And the public market rates. You might also have heard that at some point, the city government had to increase the rates, the rental rates of the public market, because it was losing. It's an economic enterprise supposedly, but it was losing money. So the city government convened a task force head by the Naga City People's Council, brought in the city government team, and brought in the representatives of the market stallholders, and looked at the spreadsheet, the details of the expenses and the income, and agreed on an approved rate. If I remember, it's like more close to 200% increase, but staggered implementation. But it's born out of, so the consent of the store holders of the market is born out of the openness of the government in terms of putting out the real score, how much it's earning, how much it's losing from its operations. And the last part, it's more on the values. I call it the principles. I'll say the mayor's office, the city hall's toilet, and the chinelas. I wanted to use Maruya, the banana fritter, for the city hall's toilet, but I think it's better. It captures the story. So the mayor's office, if you've seen pictures of it, so there's a long table, the mayor's office of Mayor Robredo, there's a long table in the middle, and I think it's maintained by our mayors after him, where citizens who have concerns and business with the city government would all sit in together in front of the mayor, and everyone would hear the concerns of everyone else. So I could be there talking about participatory governance together with a mother looking for medicines for the child, or a businessman looking to partner with the city government. And for me, it talks about, of course, we know that that's how Mayor Robredo looks at everyone, right? It's everyone's equal before the government and before him. But more importantly for me, I look at it as the openness in terms of the governance style of then Mayor Robredo. For him, whatever decision he makes, it's not for him, but for the city government, the city as a whole, for the citizens and the residents. So it's good and right for them to be there and to hear what are the concerns raised and what decisions he's making, because some of these decisions would impact them one way or another. And that's the brand of leadership. So it's beyond the law, it's beyond the activity, it's how Mayor Robredo approaches transparent governance at the time. The City Hall's toilet, it's more on his known, the open secret is Mayor Jess's kuripot, and everyone knows that. And he would always say that he would rather spend the city government's money on projects that would have impact on the lives of the Nagueños and the Nagueñas, rather than fix and beautify City Hall. And this openness in terms of the values and the priorities of the city invited support, appreciation, and engagement from many of us, from many citizens. And last, the chinelas. I was looking for a nice photo with chinelas, but I found one even without chinelas. I think this symbolizes the groundedness and the accessibility of not only his governance style, but the city government's governance approach. That it's not enough that they put it out, but they will work hard so that the citizens would access this information, engage with the information, and contribute in the development of the city. To end, I'd like to leave you a clip of his interviews. I think this is good insights on how we look at our roles as government officials, as citizens, either locally or nationally, in terms of how we can make our world a little bit better. Very short. This is from Rappler, I think 2009, aired in 2012. And after that, my presentation begins.
Good governance should be demanded by the constituency. So unless there is a convergence between good citizens and good leaders, this is difficult. Naga is good not because of City Hall, but because of the Nagueño. Good governance should be demanded by the constituency.
Just mabalos, and looking forward for a fruitful discussions with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Dave Bercasio. And to our three speakers in today's webinar, we have Judge Soliman Santos, Ms. Salve Alemania, and Mr. David Bercasio for that very comprehensive and informative lecture in today's webinar. But before we proceed with the open forum and before we proceed with the question and answer, I'd like to acknowledge first those who were in the Facebook Live. Hello po, may mga nagpapa-shoutout lang sa kay JP Abellera, former City Mayor John Bongat, we have JD, Ron Joseph Ipapo, John Ford Tesorero, we have Jerry B. Ramos, sabi niya is a proud Nagueño. We also have Josephine Gupo. We also have here from the Bikol University, Jesse M. Robredo Institute of Governance and Development, Mr. John Brian Abitria, Lara Abigail Orilla, Nika Calizo, Diana Castro, Maureen Petalio, Summer Escoto, Samantha Gonzalez, and Hannah Grace Chelo. We also have here our friends from the National Historical Commission of the Philippines main office and other museums all over the country. We have Ma'am Lelita Mabini, Roy Dolor, Miss Jana Saba, Miss Gina Jeronimo Ayran, and Sir Leonard Christopher Eduarte. Hello po. Thank you for supporting the projects of NHCP and as well as Saysay Bikol. Now, the floor is open for questions. You know, it's part of the program now. We have the open forum. Siguro we can allow Sir Dave Bercasio po to kindly turn on your camera. Ayan. So far, we have very few questions. So far sa ating mukhang nagustuhan nila yung lectures and ayan. So our first question po is from Yufi Agbayani from the National Office of NHCP. His question is, based on what you hear in the news, are there local governments today who have adopted the spirit and the policies of the late Secretary Jesse Robredo? Any of you po, Judge, Ma'am, and Sir, can answer the question.
I think I will leave it to Dave mainly, and maybe even
Yes, yes.
Salve to answer that question because you seem to be more familiar with the awards and there were even sections of that in the I-governance ordinance. And of course, Salve is also more familiar with, for example, the cross-mentoring among NGOs and POs, especially in the urban poor sector. So I leave the answering of that to you too.
Okay, I'll start with, yes, Judge, with a disclaimer a bit that I've been out also of the country for some time. But I know for a fact that there's a movement that was co-established by then Mayor Robredo called Kaya Natin, and they're looking at champions of good governance in the country. And looking at the roster from the post-public information out of the movement, there are a number of local government units implementing the various innovations, I'd say, and initiatives on local governance. I unfortunately, I'm not in a position to do one by one, but maybe just for recall, you would know that Pasig City under Mayor Vico is one of the trailblazers in terms of adapting good governance initiatives and programs. And I think he did come to Naga. I was told, I was not here at the time. He visited Naga, part of the learning program, to see the programs here and see what can be adapted. So I'm happy that the efforts are increasing in terms of adapting good governance model. So I'll pass to Salve in case there are some other cross-sharing as mentioned by Judge Sol. Thank you.
As far as I know kasi, we have this city sharing na nagsimula siya ng 1994 and parang natapos siya 2014 kasi parang wala na si Secretary Robredo. Yung city sharing kasi mas dito siya naganap sa Bicol region. So ang dalawang main concern yun good governance and urban poor land and housing ang dinadala niya. I think naman sa usapin ng urban poor, yung City of Naga, Iriga, Ligao, Masbate, Sorsogon City, Tabaco, ano naman yun ginagawa talaga nila, nagiging responsive sila sa usapin ng urban poor. Meron sila mga offices na siyang pinupuntahan ng urban poor para ma-resolve yung usapin ng plan na housing. Sa good governance, I think Legazpi City ay nag-adapt din ng NGOPO Council, ng People's Council. Hindi nga lang siya ganun hindi siya masyadong nagiging angat or unlike na Naga City na si Mayor Robredo ang mas kadikit nung Naga City People's Council. Pero I think the Bicol region itself ay ang mga LGUs natin ay gumagana para i-apply yung good governance at kasama talaga yung mga organized group sa proseso ng pamamahal. Kung how yung quality nito, yun ang hindi natin masasabi. Yun lang po. Thank you.
If I might,
Yes po, Judge. Yes po.
yeah, if I might just add, aside from saying similarly to what Dave also said, I was not based in Naga from 1993 to 2010, but of course I did my best to follow developments here in Naga, including coming on occasional visits. 2 points. First is because the Naga peace zone was the country's first and maybe even the world's first peace zone, and because the empowerment ordinance was also the first such kind of empowerment ordinance creating a Naga City People's Council, it may be safe to say that all others which followed, there were many peace zones which followed from north to south, from Sagada down to central Mindanao. And then there were also reportedly some empowerment ordinances in other local governments. Naga can in a way claim credit or bragging rights for those. Secondly, Galing Puok, which is the top award for local governance excellence and innovations. I think it's the Asian Institute of Management, which is the secretariat for that. Naga is already a Hall of Fame awardee, Galing Puok awardee, because of several awards during the time of Jess. And surely, that is one way of sharing, or that is one way that the Naga experience is being shared. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judge. Our next question is from Mr. Ron Joseph Ipapo. How does the reform regarding transparency helps improve governance for the people? I think Sir Dave can answer this.
I'll take this. Thank you, Ron Joseph. If I look at the governed, for example, first the citizens, getting the information, accessing the information can both inspire and also allow for a citizens to participate. So knowing what are the priorities of the government, knowing what policies are being considered and being discussed and being approved, enables me, for example, to come in, provide my comments, feedback, and suggestions to the city government. So it opens, so transparency opens better governance by improving participation of the citizens in the governance process. On the part of the governors, the city officials, I believe the transparency makes the government more accountable. right? Because you're putting out everything out for the consumption of the public. It follows that you govern more honestly, that you takes care of the money of the people, of the city government, and that you also opens yourself for the engagement of the citizens. So transparency opens participation, better accountability, and participation is not only on the part of the citizen, but also on the part of the government, and in inviting and opening the space for people to participate. Thank you.
Salve? Comments po? You're on mute po, ma'am.
Wala pa ako may dadagdag.
Okay po. Sige po. Thank you. How about you po, Sir Judge Sol?
Same here, no? Dave said it all.
Sige po. Thank you. And siguro another question po. Since I think you've worked with Mayor Jessie, the three of you, ano daw po ang naging inspirasyon ng konsepto ng Maogmang Lugar ni Mayor Jessie?
All right. I'll give my 2 cents worth about that. Ang Maogmang Lugar, if my Bikol history and culture is right, was a formulation by the late Ateneo de Naga Jesuit father James O'Brien, from his studies of Naga culture, to the effect that this was how the city, or the people of the city, the citizens, looked at our place, ang Maogmang Lugar, the happy place. And I think this is part of the civic pride, or the pride of place that we Nagueños have in our city, and should continue to sustain it, to keep the city a happy place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Sir Dave, a few comments po.
Yeah, maybe just to add, I came in a little bit late on the time when Mayor Robredo was mayor. At the time when I was with the NCPC, the Maogmang Lugar became, as a vision, became the guidepost for the city in defining what the city should be. So there was an effort, a multi-sector effort, to sit down and define what is a Maogmang Lugar, looking at policy, services, participation, engagement. So there might be the definition as Judge Sol has provided, but it also evolved in a way that the succeeding of officials of the city and the citizens through the organized groups have defined what it meant. And for sure, many of us will have our own different definitions, but it's a very good guiding post on how we see ourselves as we are situated in and live in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question po. I think this is a bit controversial, but I have to ask this. Is Naga still an Maogmang Lugar? Or can I say that, how are we doing so far? Based on what you've said a while ago with everything that nasabi during the lectures and discussion. How are we doing? How are we doing so far? Are we still the Maogmang Lugar?
Can I
Judge.
can I give Dave and Salve first crack at that?
Sure po. Sir Dave, Salve.
Okay. Okay, let me share. Kasi yung Maogmang Lugar concept, as I remember, Ito yung city na, di ba, na-award na siya na most livable city. So kapag livable city, andyan yung magandang pamamahala, andyan yung magandang kapalibutan, yung merong security of tenure, yung ating mga urban poor, merong magandang pinagkakakitaan in terms of livelihood, the farmers. So hindi, walang naiiwan sa development. So I've been out of Naga City for about 9 years. So 9 years. Hindi ko masyadong alam na yung pamantayan ngayon ng ating involvement sa governance. Pero sa nakikita ko at na-obserba, hindi sa nakikita, sa mga naririnig ko sa ibang sector, medyo may kakulangan na yung ating mga basic sector na paigtingin yung kanilang partisipasyon. So ito nga yung nagiging thrust ngayon ng Naga City People's Council na ayusin ang mga sektor na to. Kasi minsan yung participation sa local special bodies sa mga committee hearings ay hindi na gaanong napapansin. Kasi crucial yung ating participation sa mga committee hearings. Just halimbawa noong mga panahon na yon, sa Land Use Committee, kadalasan may dalawang sektor na nai-involve. Meron pang irrigated land na gagawin mong subdivision. Dalawang sektor ang apektado. Dalawang sektor, yung isa apektado, yung isa ay magbe-benepisyo. So sa usapang ito, paano ito isinasagawa? So malalim na usapin ng bawat sektor. Sa ngayon, hindi na ganun kataas ang problema. Pero yung pagpapalalim ng sektor ay siya pa rin ginagawa ngayon ng NCPC. Kaya meron pa namang involvement siya. So parang assessment-wise sa level ng mga noong naging parte ng Naga City People's Council, parang medyo humina na yung ating pagiging militant. Parang konti na lang yung nagsasaway sa ating government ngayon. That's my personal comment based on pag-usap-usap sa mga ibang sectors. Yun lang po.
Thank you, Ma'am Salve. Siguro si Judge.
Dave, may sasabihin ka ba? Kung wala, ako na.
Ikaw na muna, Judge. Sige.
Okay.
Sige, Judge.
Maybe let me try to answer that by putting it this way, no? Using the parameters of the three themes that were the subject of our Maogmang Lugar webinar this morning: peace advocacy, people's participation, and transparent governance. One way of looking at it, no, the half full glass way of looking at it is siguro medyo maugmang lugar o di kaya garo maugmang lugar. The proactive, forward-looking, optimistic way of looking at it is gibuhon tang mas maugmang lugar. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you po. Sir Dave, may few comments pa po ba?
Konti lang. Dapat pala ako nauna kay Judge. Totally the same. For me personally, when I came home, I feel happy. And that's, I think, a very personal sense of happiness that many of us would share, especially those who have lived outside of Naga. You come home, you feel that you're at home. So not only comfort zone, but a happy zone. But I totally agree with Judge. When I came home, I also have been involved in a number of initiatives looking at good governance, participatory governance, even in the COVID response. And there are things that we can do together to make it more happier, mas maugma. And this is something that the city also looks at, following the tradition that was introduced by then Mayor Robredo. He always calls for making the best better. We never look at ourselves, even at the time that we are the best in the country, that there's nothing that we can improve on. And I think more so with the with the leadership that we have now in the city government and in the civil society, there are things that we can do together, more that we can do together to make it more a happy place. And I invite also those who are watching, those who are from the city, to help in this reflection process. Right? How do you feel? On that question, I think is very important, not only for the city officials, but for us citizens. And the challenge that the judge posed to us, like how can we make it more happier, mas maugma? I think it's a good call for us on the occasion of the celebration of commemoration of the death of Secretary Robredo. Thank you.
Thank you. On that note, I think last few words po sa tatlo. Judge Sol, I think may yes po.
I'll start. Si Judge
Yeah,
Sol
sige po. Sir Dave,
sa last.
last few words po.
Ako man siguro ang youngest sa Muntulo. No, I said it earlier. I'm very thankful for the Historical Commission, the Museo, and Saysay Bikol for this activity. It's really important. We even had discussions with BIC before and some of the colleagues in the City Hall and in NCPC on how do we communicate better the governance culture in Naga to the next generation. There's a realization that those who get involved either in the youth program or get elected in the City Hall, that's the only time that they would know that we have People's Council, that we have participatory governance, that we have a transparent government. So I think next year, when you guys are contemplating, let's see how we can talk more to the next generation, get them informed, involved, and aware of the space available for them to take part in improving the city of Naga. So congratulations, very good approach to the commemoration, and I hope that you guys would continue working on similar activities in the future. Thank you.
Salve po. Last few words before we end the program.
So maraming salamat sa National Historical Commission for inviting me and para na-refresh yung mga nakaraang ginagawa ng Naga City nung nagsisimula na. Siguro magandang panahon ngayon ng Naga City na nagkakaroon sila ng assessment on the partnership kasi mas makikita ano ba yung kailangang pag-ibayuhin pa, ano yung kailangang ayusin pa sa partnership na ito. Pero tandaan natin na hindi lang yung ating government ang may responsibilidad sa maganda at maayos na pamahalaan, bagkus tayo bilang mga individual at nasa atin din ang lakas. Nasa atin ang lakas para tayo ay magbigay ng mga solutions at maging bahagi ng programa na magiging solusyon sa anumang problema o kahirapan na dinadanas natin. So that's all. At maraming salamat ulit sa Naga City, sa Historic Commission na pag-imbita sa atin sa webinar.
Thank you, Salve. Finally, Judge Sol.
Thank you, Mark. I join Dave and Salve in what they said, including thanking the organizers of this webinar. It looks like a good start for more good that could happen for the city. This kind of sharing, exchange of ideas and information. I hope there can be some kind of follow-through in this, in the same way that maybe there was not enough follow-through on the Naga Peace Zone in decades back. There should be a good follow-through process for this, leading up to the critical juncture of mid 2022. And let's hope for the better, no? Both for our country and for Naga. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Dave, Salve, and Judge Sol, for that very inspiring experiential lecture. Sabi nga po ni Sir Dave Kasubagov, it's an experiential lecture and talk. Ayan. And before we end the program, again, I'm Francis Moreleda po. I now give the floor to our curator, Shrine Curator 2 of the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, Museo Robredo, Mr. Mark Anthony Glorioso for the closing remarks po. Salamat po. Thank you.
Okay, maraming salamat Francis. Mula po sa Museo ni Robredo, nais po namin ipahatid ang aming pasasalamat unang-una sa ating mga tagapagsalita. Mr. Dave Bercasio, Ms. Salve at Judge Soliman Santos. Salamat rin sa aming NHCP family na pinangungunahan ni Chairman Rene Escalante, Executive Director Restituto Aguilar, Ma'am Gina Batuhan na aming Chief sa Historic Sites and Education Division at sa aming Supervising HSDO si Sir Brian Anthony Paraiso. Pasasalamat din sa ating technical team, nariyan po si Sir Eufemio Agbayani III, sa Saysay Bikol na nakipag-partner sa amin para maging posible ang programang ito, at sa mga kasama natin sa NHCP Inter-Regional Museum Cluster. Maraming sa programang ito. Ilang paalala lamang po bago tayo magtapos para sa mga nais makatanggap ng Certificate of Participation. Mangyari lamang po na sagutan ang evaluation link na nasa comment section. Magkita-kita ulit tayo mamaya. 2:00 ng hapon para sa ikalawang webinar ng Museo ni Robredo na may titulong Pamumunong Bagani, ang pamanang huwara na iniwan ni Ramon Magsaysay at Jessie Robredo. Makakasama po natin mamaya dyan si Professor Xiao Chua. So yun lamang po. Muli maraming salamat at palagi po tayong mag-iingat.